The sound of heavy footsteps approached quickly. A few seconds later, an unexpected figure burst into the living room. This house really feels like home. What? Standing there with a beaming smile was my ex-husband, Roy. While the rest of us were left speechless, Roy plopped himself onto the sofa, completely at ease. Without hesitation, he spoke to us with no hint of shame. "I'm back. It must have been tough managing the household without me, huh? What kind of person says that after abandoning their family for an affair? Sure, things are stable now thanks to my current husband Benjamin's income. But right after the divorce, it was an uphill battle. And yet, here he was, acting like he had done nothing wrong. Did he really think we'd greet him with a welcome back? Not a chance. I couldn't even muster the energy to respond. My son, Sean, and daughter, Mira, were silent too. Even Benjamin, the kindest man I know, was frozen in place, speechless. Not a single one of us replied to Roy. He doesn't belong here anymore. I was determined to show him that. My name is Victoria Young. I'm 36 years old and a working mom. I married Roy 14 years ago when I was just 22. He was 7 years older than me. I have 2 kids. My eldest, Sean, is 14 years old. His younger sister, Mira, is 13. They're incredibly responsible kids, and I rely on them a lot in my daily life. Their dad, Roy, has always been so free-spirited that the kids probably learned what not to do by watching him, and they grew up to be the dependable kids they are today. I met Roy when I was a college student. He was an employee at the family restaurant where I worked part-time. Don't worry. If any rude customers give you a hard time, I'll step in and take care of it. Just call me right away, okay? Thank you so much." He was a kind and reliable senior colleague. True to his word, Roy was always the first to step in if something went wrong. "I'm so sorry. I'm always causing you trouble, Mr. Young. Don't worry about it. It's a man's job to protect a woman. Keep leaning on me whenever you need help." Roy said it confidently, without any arrogance, standing tall with pride. What a wonderful person, I thought. It didn't take long for me to fall for him. Not long after, Roy asked me out, and we started dating. By the time I graduated college, we were married. No one else cared about me as much as he did. If I married him, I thought, I would definitely be happy. I was so sure of it. But that confidence shattered right after Sean was born. What? Another night out? Yay! We're celebrating a friend's promotion. He's worked really hard, so we have to do it right. But you were out until morning the day before yesterday too. That was a farewell party. It's part of work. I can't help it. Anyway, don't worry about me. Just go to bed without waiting up, okay? Hey, Sean, Dad's heading out now, see you later. The way Roy spoke to Sean made him seem like a great husband and father. He was working hard at his job, too. Since I got pregnant with Sean right after starting my job and ended up leaving it, we were able to live comfortably thanks to Roy's income. Thinking about that, I told myself, I guess a few nights out aren't such a big deal. And so I tried to push through each day. But with the challenges of raising my first child, and on top of that, the constant lack of sleep, my frustration finally exploded. I can't take it anymore. Why is it always about your nights out? Even on your days off, you either disappear somewhere or spend the whole day sleeping. I need a break too. I haven't had a proper night's sleep in ages. It happened on the day Roy was headed to his office Christmas party. What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Why is everything left to me? Sean is our child, but you only dote on him when you feel like it. You don't change his diapers. You don't put him to bed. You sleep whenever you want. and go out whenever you want. We're supposed to be equal as parents, so why does it feel like I'm doing it all on my own? Roy had always been a free spirit, but I never thought he would stay the same even after becoming a father. If he was invited to a party, Roy never missed it, and he always came home late. And when he was home, all he did was sleep or scroll through his phone, claiming he was too tired. Even when Sean cried while I was cooking, Roy wouldn't even bother to pick him up. Can you really call yourself a dad like this? Overwhelmed with emotion, tears streamed down my face. Roy, standing in front of me, let out a long sigh. All right, let me ask you this. Who do you think is the reason you're able to live comfortably? It's you, Roy. But still, no but, that's right. The only reason you and Sean live without any problems is because I work so hard. And now you're telling me I can't even have a little break. Would you be happy if you took everything away from me? That's not what I meant. My voice faltered, and Roy exaggeratedly shrugged his shoulders. I get it. You're jealous, right? You're just stuck at home with a baby, doing nothing meaningful, while I'm out here, excelling at work and enjoying life. You just can't stand seeing me succeed, can you? No, that's not. All right, calm down, Roy said, patting my back as if to console me. Don't worry. Even if you're totally useless, I won't abandon you. So don't overthink it, okay? Later. With that, he waved cheerfully and left the house. His wild assumptions left me stunned, and I stood frozen in place. Nothing meaningful, useless. It felt like Roy had thrown his current opinion of me right in my face. After that, I became scared to confront him. What if he said something like that again? Could I bear to feel so humiliated? I didn't want my self-esteem shattered like that ever again. Taking care of a child is important work. I was doing my best. I tried to encourage myself to endure. The sleepless nights continued. But fortunately, my mom, Kelly, called me at just the right time. Victoria, if you're struggling, that makes me feel sad. Don't hesitate to tell me, okay? That's just like Mom. Mom knows me so well. Since my parents live a plane ride away, I could never ask them to come here. I'd feel too guilty. But this time, since Mom reached out, I was able to ask for help before reaching my breaking point. Roy had the nerve to say, "You're having her come again? Aren't you leaning on her too much?" But he had no right to comment when he wasn't helping at all. Mom brushed it off, saying, "I just want to see my adorable grandchild and daughter. That's all." Her words were so comforting that I couldn't help but cry. Eventually, Sean's sleep schedule started to stabilize, and I was able to get better rest too. Sleep is truly essential for humans. Once I wasn't sleep deprived anymore, even the most hellish days seemed to brighten. Roy continued to act as if he were still single, doing whatever he wanted, but I didn't even care anymore. As long as he brought in money, that was enough for me. No matter how much I complained, he never changed. I came to realize that it was pointless to argue with him. It was better to avoid unnecessary conflict. By the time Sean was 6 months old, I had figured out the best approach. I smiled as I waved Roy off to his parties, and I even felt a strange pity for him. Choosing nights out over spending time with such a lovely son, what a poor, misguided man. If only he realized that time flies, and Sean would grow up in the blink of an eye. Hoping he might one day feel like a real dad, I would occasionally shower him with praise whenever he paid attention to Sean. "Sean looks so happy when you hold him, Roy. Look at that smile." "Of course he is. The only reason Sean is alive is thanks to me," Roy replied, grinning proudly. I bit back my urge to argue, forcing a smile instead. What an oblivious man. Not long after, I found out I was pregnant with our second child. Mira was born just before Sean turned 2. Knowing Roy wouldn't change, I decided to extend my stay at my parents' house after the birth. When I told him, Roy looked visibly annoyed. A month is one thing, but 3 months? What am I supposed to do while you're gone? What about meals, laundry, cleaning? Not a word about missing me or wanting to see his family. It felt like I was just a housekeeper taking time off. I've stoked the freezer with a month's worth of meals. If you run out, just let me know. But since you eat out so often, I'm sure it'll be fine. The washing machine handles drying too, so I'll explain how to use it later. As for cleaning, maybe hire a housekeeper or a service once a week if needed, I explained calmly, and Roy looked flustered. Wait, but honestly, there's no way I can take care of a newborn and Sean all on my own. Unless you want to take paternity leave. No, that's impossible. Of course, Roy would never take paternity leave. That one response sealed the deal, and I secured my 3-month stay at my parents' house. When Mira turned 1, I started looking for a part-time job. Our household finances were getting tighter. Roy had insisted on managing our finances himself. Each month, I received a set allowance from him, but then he told me he wanted to reduce it. What? But our expenses are only going to grow from here. You've been spoiled until now. I've been giving you too much. From now on, you'll have to manage with this amount. If it's not enough, figure it out yourself. Having married right after graduating college, I had almost no savings. My parents could probably help, but that would be my last resort. Job hunting, as a mother with no work history and 2 small children, was a challenge. Working hours, location, pay. I applied to every position within my limits. All I can do now is pray. At least there were daycare spots available nearby. If there weren't, I'd be out of options. I really am trying to save, I muttered to myself. Roy claimed I'd been spoiled, but I hadn't been extravagant. In fact, I'd cut back as much as I could. I didn't eat out unless Roy wanted to, and I hadn't bought clothes or makeup since we got married. What else could I possibly cut? Please, let me find a job, I prayed. The interviews were nerve-wracking, but in the end, I got hired at a supermarket. My shift was weekday mornings to afternoons. Evening shifts paid better, but coming home late would make Roy upset, so this was the best I could do. The supermarket saw a steady stream of customers every day. That's where I unexpectedly ran into someone from my past. Victoria, is that you? Wait. Oh. The man calling my name was a handsome guy in a suit. It took me a second, but when I saw his face, the memories came rushing back. Ben. Oh wow, it's been ages since I heard you call me that. That warm smile of his, it was so familiar. Ben had been a neighbor near my parents' house. He was 7 years older than me. The same age as Roy, I realized. Of all places to run into you, Victoria. This is a surprise. I'm just as shocked. If this had been back in my hometown, it would have made sense, but this was far away. It turned out Ben lived nearby and often shopped at the supermarket. After that, Ben started dropping by occasionally, and we'd chat while I worked the register. Thanks to him, my part-time job became something I genuinely enjoyed. With my earnings, our financial situation eased up a bit, and I didn't have to make the kids sacrifice too much. Roy seemed to grow colder, but I was so focused on raising the kids that I barely noticed. Before I knew it, Sean and Mara were in middle school. Then one day, Roy came home from work, loosening his tie, and casually dropped a bombshell. Oh, by the way, I'm leaving this house tomorrow. What? It felt like time had stopped. What do you mean? Is it for a business trip No, nothing like that. Then what is it? I found a place where I truly belong. As I tilted my head in confusion, Roy looked completely unfazed and explained further. I've found my soulmate. You know, someone who really needs me, just like I need them. So you guys are just in the way now. Excuse me. My jaw dropped. What kind of 40-something father says that to his wife? This was an outright declaration of infidelity. And it wasn't just me, he'd made it clear he didn't care about the kids either. I don't even understand what you're saying. You don't have to. All you need to know is that I'm leaving. But here's the paperwork. Fill it out and file it for me later. The paper Roy handed over was a divorce application. He was serious about leaving. This can't be happening. At least let's talk this through. You know I'm not changing my mind, right? Then you know what you need to do. The next day, as promised, Roy left. Life afterward was tough. I had suddenly become the sole breadwinner. The only saving grace was the kindness of my coworkers. Thanks to my part-time job manager's understanding, I was offered a full-time position. Mrs. Young is a diligent worker, they said. I felt grateful that my hard work had paid off. Sean and Mira also stepped up. We can help with the chores, they said. At first, I didn't know how we'd manage, but as the saying goes, it wasn't as bad as I feared. Within a few months, our lives had become more fulfilling than when Roy was around. I owed it to my job, my kids, and one other person. That person was Ben Benjamin. After Roy left and the divorce paperwork was filed, Benjamin became someone I could confide in. Over time, we found ourselves drawn to each other. Eventually, Benjamin confessed his feelings, and we began dating. If it weren't for him, I might have been a mess. Thanks to him, our lives felt complete. A few months into our relationship, Benjamin proposed, and we became a family. I remarried less than a year after my divorce. I worried about how the kids would react, but as they spent time with Benjamin, they warmed up to him. We all resolved to cooperate and enjoy our new life together. One Sunday, we finally had a day with no plans. Why don't we go somewhere for a change? I suggested. That's a great idea. But Benjamin must be tired, Mira said. I'm fine. Sean, Mira, any places you'd like to go? Benjamin replied. Their eyes lit up with excitement, despite being teenagers. Watching their joyful expressions filled me with happiness. Just then, I heard a noise from the front door. What was that? It sounded like someone opening the door. Then came the heavy sound of footsteps approaching. A moment later, someone burst into the living room. This place really feels like home. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what was happening. The person standing there with a big grin was none other than my ex-husband, Roy. While we stared in disbelief, Roy plopped onto the sofa, relaxing as if he owned the place. He smiled and said, "I'm back. It must have been hard keeping things together without me, huh? What kind of person abandons their family for an affair, and then has the audacity to say that?" Sure, things were stable now thanks to Benjamin's income, but after the divorce, it had been a struggle. And yet, Roy showed no sign of guilt. Did he really think we'd greet him with a welcome back? Not a chance. None of us said a word. Sean and Mira seemed just as stunned as I was. Even Benjamin, the kindest person I knew, was silent, frozen in place. Come on, are you all ignoring me? Or are you too nervous to say anything after so long? Finally, Roy noticed Benjamin. His eyes widened, and his brows furrowed. And who the hell is this guy? Hey, what's going on? How could you cheat on me? Answer me, Victoria. Were you always this unfaithful? There was no point arguing with a fool. This wasn't about intelligence. Roy was just too ridiculous to deal with. His face was red as he yelled. But let's not forget he was the one who cheated and left. Meanwhile, I had finalized my divorce properly before remarrying. There was nothing legally or morally wrong with what I had done. Roy had no right to ignore his own actions and spout baseless accusations. Victoria, Sean, Mira, frustrated by our silence. Roy's shouting grew louder. I turned my face away without saying a word, and Sean and Mira followed suit. Benjamin looked like he wanted to say something, but I gently pulled his arm to stop him. "You're all ignoring me. You're mocking me, aren't you?" No matter how much he yelled, our family completely ignored him. For someone as prideful as Roy, this must have been unbearable. Roy continued to make a dramatic scene, yelling and ranting to himself, but when none of us responded, he finally couldn't take it anymore and stormed out of the house. "This must be bad timing. I'll come back, you'll see." It was laughably pathetic. I exchanged glances with Mira, and we both burst out laughing. "You'll see, seriously? Do people actually say that?" Mira chuckled. "They sure do. But still, he said he'd be back. But would he really?" I wasn't sure, but a week passed, and Roy didn't show up. "Maybe he's not coming back," Sean said one Sunday as we walked side by side. "I hope so," I replied with a small sigh, recalling how much trouble he brought. Just then, a voice called my name from behind. "You, who's that young guy? Cheating again. First that other man, and now this young guy too." The speaker, rambling without waiting for a response, was Roy himself, the very person we'd just been discussing. It seemed he'd mistaken Sean for someone else. Sure, Sean had grown taller over the past year, but he was only 15. Couldn't Roy at least recognize his own son's face? After all, they had just seen each other 2 weeks ago. As I stood there speechless, Sean stepped in. "What are you even talking about, old man? Are you serious, old man? How dare you speak to an elder like that? I'd like to see your parents," Roy yelled. "They're standing right here. Or should I hand you a mirror?" Sean quipped. "What?" Roy, seemingly catching on, squinted at Sean, and then opened his eyes wide in shock. "Wow, wait. You're Sean. I didn't recognize you with that outfit. Seriously? Even as my ex-dad, you should at least remember your own kid. Were you really that uninterested in me?" No, that's not it. I just slipped up. Mistaking your own child for someone else, especially for a supposed lover, was an insult to both me and Sean. But hey, this works out. Sean, be happy. Dad's coming back." "No thanks. I already have a dad." "What?" Roy furrowed his brows in confusion as Sean waved enthusiastically toward someone behind him. "Speak of the devil. Dad. Mira." Roy spun around sharply. There, waving back at Sean and smiling warmly, were Mira and Benjamin. Sean, "Oh, and that man is?" Benjamin asked politely, looking at Roy. Roy glared at Benjamin. "Sean, who is this guy?" Seeing you two side by side really shows the difference in quality as people. "Dad, this is my ex-dad," Sean said with a grin. Nodding calmly, Benjamin casually stepped between Roy and me. "Hello there." His tone was polite but carried an undeniable weight. Roy glared at Benjamin, clearly agitated. "Don't tell me you actually divorced and remarried." "No way Victoria would do that," he muttered under his breath, a strange mix of denial and disbelief on his face. "Victoria, you were always cautious and skeptical. There's no way you would accept some random guy after just 1 year. This has to be a lie, right?" "It's true. Benjamin is my husband. After you left, he supported our family." "That's a lie." For Roy, Anything he didn't want to believe was simply labeled as false. Oh, I see. You remarried because you were desperate for money. You were broke after I left, so you had no choice but to marry this guy. Coward. The fact that he could twist reality so blatantly to suit his narrative was almost impressive. I didn't remarry for money. I remarried because I love Benjamin as a man and as a person. That's impossible. It's all about the money. You were struggling after I left, so you knew we'd struggle financially without you, and yet you still left us. Doesn't that make you the coward? My cold response made Roy flinch for the first time. Then, Mira hugged Benjamin's arm tightly and spoke up. Oh, thank goodness Mom left such a cowardly man behind. Now we have an amazing dad, and I'm so happy. Hearing that from his own daughter seemed to hit Roy hard. Staggering slightly, he silently walked away, looking defeated. Benjamin looked at me apologetically. The kids are so incredible that I don't even need to do a thing, he said. Dad, you're too nice. Leave it to us, Sean and Mira reassured him. At this point, I thought Roy wouldn't bother us anymore. But it seems the world is full of people with unexpected persistence. 3 days later, Roy showed up at our house again. What are you doing here? Sean asked, annoyed. How dare you talk to your father like that? What's wrong with a parent wanting to see their kids? It's not like there's a restraining order against me. Maybe I should have hired a lawyer to take things that far. I never expected him to be this persistent. After he left, I thought I'd never see him again, but I never imagined it would turn into something like this. Anyway, this house is still under my name. Stop barging in whenever you feel like it. I managed to stop him at the door, but Roy's attempts to push his way in became an ongoing problem for me and the kids. If I feel like coming by, I'll ring the doorbell. And if I see the kids in town, I'll talk to them. I have the right to do that. It's my decision. I had thought our troubles with Roy ended with a divorce, but they were far from over. Would the police take this seriously if I reported it? Probably not. It'd likely be dismissed as a family matter. Then I guess we'll have to handle this ourselves. I'll help, and so will the kids. Benjamin reassured me. Thank you. Let's do this. From that point, we began preparing to put an end to things with Roy once and for all. In the meantime, Roy continued to visit, but we ignored him completely. At most, we gave him vague responses, which frustrated him far more than being yelled at. As expected, Roy started losing his energy. Yesterday, he looked visibly dejected and irritated. Do you think he'll lash out if we keep this up? Mira asked, worried. I smiled at her reassuringly. Don't worry, the time to settle this is almost here. 3 days later, Roy showed up as usual, but this time, he was in a full-blown rage. It seemed he had finally reached his breaking point. Enough is enough. This petty harassment is disgraceful. Aren't you ashamed of yourselves? Face flushed red, Roy stood at the doorway, yelling. Benjamin stepped forward, blocking Rue's path. I was hoping you'd reflect on your behavior, but since that's clearly not going to happen, let's settle this once and for all. Settle this? What do you mean? While Roy was thrown off by Benjamin's commanding presence, I quickly assured Sean and Mira to their rooms. Benjamin asked me to step away too, but I refused to leave everything to him. When Benjamin gave me a concerned look, I reassured him with a quiet "it's okay," and stayed by his side. How dare this guy barge into another man's family, stealing a wife while her husband's away? You're nothing but a homewrecker, Roy shouted. I was relieved that I had sent the kids away. I didn't want them to hear such vile words. Homewrecker, that's ridiculous. It's the truth. Or maybe that term better applies to Amelia. Benjamin interjected calmly. Amelia. It was a name I had never heard before, but Roy clearly recognized it. He was visibly shaken. Just moments ago, he had been so full of confidence, but now his eyes darted nervously from side to side, filled with confusion. How do you know that name? I wouldn't have taken things this far if you hadn't forced my hand by continuing to harass Victoria and her family. But now, to protect her and the children, I have no choice but to bring the truth to light. Roy's face turned pale. From his reaction, I could guess what Benjamin meant. Amelia. She's your affair partner, isn't she? It was a leading question, but it seemed I had hit the mark. Roy flinched, his shoulders shaking noticeably. The corners of his mouth twitched, and beads of nervous sweat formed on his forehead. But why is he so shaken now when he openly admitted to having an affair before? I wondered aloud. That's because, Roy stammered. Benjamin stepped in to explain. Back then, Roy had money. He didn't care if he was sued for alimony because he thought he could handle it. Plus, he was so overconfident. He didn't think that you, Victoria, would actually divorce him. Yay, that's right. I may have signed the divorce papers, but I never thought you'd actually file them. Roy blurted out. Are you serious? I was beyond baffled. Where did such baseless confidence even come from? Did Roy think I was so hopelessly in love with him that I'd never let him go? And then, even while things were fine with Amelia, you cheated on her too, didn't you? And now, after the divorce proceedings drained your savings, you've got nothing left. Benjamin continued. How do you know all of this? Roy stammered, his voice shaking. While you were busy harassing us, I did some investigating. Honestly, don't you feel embarrassed clinging to a family you abandoned? Did you really think Victoria would welcome you back because she's too kind to refuse? Roy didn't respond, but his silence said it all. I couldn't help but feel insulted. It seemed that during our marriage, especially toward the end, I had resigned myself to accepting everything Roy did. Maybe that's why he thought I'd always take him back, no matter what. That's right. Amelia found out about my other affair, exposed me to the company, and now I'm about to lose my apartment. I thought maybe Victoria would help me. She's kind, after all. Why would I help you? I asked coldly. I mean, you remarried, but I know you still what? Love you. Who in the world would be so naive to continue loving someone who suddenly cheated, abandoned their children, and walked out is simply unthinkable. I've told you over and over again you're a nuisance. I can't even stand to look at your face. And the kids. It's obvious, isn't it? You may have spent over a decade with them, but it's Benjamin they admire now. But I supported you all financially. Roy sputtered. And I supported you. I handled all the housework, raised the kids, did everything. Did you know marriage is supposed to be a partnership? Once it becomes one-sided, it's over. And on top of that, you cheated. That's as low as it gets. I thought Roy might lash back, but instead, his face turned pale, and he trembled slightly. So, you don't care about me at all. I just think of you as a nuisance, I replied coldly. It became clear that Roy's misplaced confidence stemmed from the belief that I still cared about him. He must have thought I would never refuse him, that I would eventually come around, no matter how much I initially resisted. After repeatedly rejecting him head-on and exposing his weaknesses, especially Amelia, it finally sank in. I would have been satisfied if Roy had disappeared from my life forever. But Benjamin and the kids convinced me to pursue alimony in court. Thanks to the evidence Benjamin gathered and Roy's own admissions, the court quickly ruled in our favor. I worried about whether we could even collect the alimony, given Roy's depleted savings. But as it turned out, his parents stepped in to cover the amount. Roy had always claimed his parents were toxic, which was why I never met them. However, that turned out to be a lie. They were merely estranged. Regarding the alimony negotiations, I spoke with Roy's parents for the first time through our lawyers. To my surprise, they turned out to be very reasonable people. Additionally, they even offered to pay child support on Roy's behalf. Roy was taken back to live with his parents, where he would now be under their strict supervision. His previously carefree lifestyle took a complete turn, as he now had to juggle work and household chores daily. There was no time left for affairs, or even for leisure, and he seemed to have become entirely miserable. On top of that, the alimony that his parents had covered would have to be repaid by Roy in installments. The total amount was substantial, and while I didn't feel sorry for him, I did think it was an unfortunate situation. With Roy's troubles finally resolved, our happy days with Benjamin and the kids returned. I had always known Benjamin was a calm and kind person, but I was honestly surprised by just how dependable he turned out to be. The kids seemed to feel the same way, and their admiration for Benjamin grew even stronger. Although he seemed a bit flustered by their respect, I couldn't help but think how lucky I was to have married such a wonderful person. My first marriage may have been a failure, but as the saying goes, all's well that ends well, and I'm truly glad that my final marriage is with Benjamin.
I remarried a young and beautiful woman, unlike you. Shane, my ex-husband, said to me with a vulgar smile on his face. Getting remarried just a week after our divorce. He was probably cheating on me even when we were married. Shane and I used to be a loving couple for a while after we got married. Since we both liked children, we had been thinking about having kids from the beginning of our marriage. I hope we can have kids soon. I want a boy and a girl, one of each. Ideally, the first one would be a girl and the second a boy. Shane spoke happily about our future. However, we couldn't have children despite our efforts. As time went on, our relationship deteriorated, and we ended up hating each other and getting divorced. 1 week later, while visiting the mall to take my mind off things, I ran into Shane. My name is Hillary. I'm in my 30s and work at a company. I met my husband, who is 4 years older than me, through a friend, and we got married 3 years ago. My husband's name is Shane. Shane and I both love children, so we had been thinking about having kids from the start of our marriage. I hope we can have kids soon. I want a boy and a girl, one of each. Ideally, the first one would be a girl and the second a boy. Yes, that's right. As long as they're healthy, I don't really care about the gender, but I'd like to have more than one. We exchanged these conversations with smiles, imagining what our children would look like and what their personalities would be. However, even after 1 year, 2 years of marriage, we couldn't have children. In the first year, he said, "It didn't work again, huh? Well, we don't need to rush. They say it's a gift from heaven." But from the second year onwards, he started to get angry. "What? It didn't work again? My coworker got married and had a baby within 2 months. Why can't we have one?" Even if you say that to me. Around this time, our relationship started to worsen. Shane's attitude became harsh, and I couldn't bear it alone, so I often confided in my best friend, Aurora. Aurora always listened to me seriously. "I see. He really wants kids, so I understand why he gets disappointed, but I wish he'd be more considerate of you, Hillary," she said sympathetically. That's right. It's like he's become a different person. He used to be so kind. Remembering the old Shane, I sighed deeply. Aurora also shared her worries with me, and we confided in each other about things we couldn't easily tell others. Even after that, we couldn't have children, and before I knew it, 3 years had passed since we got married. I thought it was impossible to get pregnant naturally, so one day I suggested infertility treatment to Shane. After finishing dinner, I spoke to him, who was drinking coffee. "Hey Shane. We haven't had kids in 3 years, right? I'm already 34, so how about we try infertility treatment?" At my words, he made a blatantly annoyed face. "What? Infertility treatment? Isn't it because you're just getting old? If you want to do it by yourself. Why would you say that?" I was stunned by his unexpectedly harsh response and was at a loss for words. "I'm not doing it. There's no way the problem is with me." Shane spat out those words and quickly left for the bedroom. I was left standing there in shock. Is he not willing to cooperate at all? I quietly murmured, feeling a mix of emptiness and sadness. Reluctantly, I decided to go to the fertility clinic alone for the time being. After undergoing the initial tests by myself. "Where is your husband? He needs to cooperate too. Many cases of infertility are due to male factors. Next time, bring him along," the doctor asked. Taking the doctor's words to heart, I decided to discuss the issue with him again that night. "Hey, infertility treatment won't work if it's just me. You need to get tested too, so can you come to the clinic with me?" "What? You think it's my fault? It's obviously your problem, not mine. I'm not involved. I told you to handle it on your own. Don't drag me into this," he shouted angrily. "But it seems that male infertility is also common." "What?" The doctor said so, and he insisted that husbands need to cooperate too. "Please, Shane, come to the clinic with me," I pleaded desperately with him. Reluctantly, with an annoyed look on his face. "Fine. Stop nagging," he finally said. A few days later, I took Shane to the fertility clinic. Shane underwent the tests, but when he came out of the examination room, he looked irritated and upset. We waited in the waiting room to hear the results of my previous tests and Shane's recent ones. However, the clinic was crowded, and we weren't called for a while. Shane, unable to wait any longer, stood up from his seat and said, "I'm leaving." Ignoring my attempts to stop him, he left the clinic alone. Reluctantly, I decided to hear the results by myself. Finally, I was called in and listened to the doctor's findings, which shocked me. "I have to tell him." I hurried home. Opening the door, I said, "I'm home," and then washed my hands before heading to the living room. There stood Shane, looking furious, his face contorted like a demon. "What's going on? Hey! This is ridiculous. I thought fertility tests would be easier. Why did I have to go through such humiliation?" Apparently, he was unhappy with the methods used in the male infertility test. "Well, we need to do proper tests to find out why we can't have a baby. So, about the test results." Before I could finish, he interrupted me, yelling, "You're an old woman, that's why we can't have kids, and I had to go through that. I can't take it anymore. I want a divorce." "What? What are you talking about all of a sudden?" Shane's sudden declaration of divorce left me stunned. "I can't live with an infertile old woman anymore." "What?" After enduring Shane's insults and the way he blamed me for being infertile, my feelings for him turned ice cold in that moment. "Fine. Let's get a divorce." "Good, I'm glad you're agreeing so quickly. Get out, infertile old woman." I packed my things in silence and left the house. I decided to stay at my parents' place for the time being. My parents welcomed me warmly, which I appreciated deeply. As soon as I arrived at my parents' house, I filled out my portion of the divorce papers and sent them to him. 3 years of marriage with Shane. In the beginning, he was kind and a good husband. We had many happy memories together. But the Shane I loved is no more. When I recall his ugly face, calling me an infertile old woman and demanding a divorce, I feel a deep sadness and a surge of intense anger. I no longer had even a shred of affection left for him. A week later, I went to a large shopping mall to clear my mind. As I wandered through the bustling corridors, I spotted a familiar profile in the distance and couldn't help but mutter, "Oh, great, just my luck." I quickly turned on my heel, hoping to leave unnoticed. "Hillary, is that you?" Unfortunately, Shane had already spotted me and called out. I ignored him and kept walking. "Hey, wait up!" But he grabbed my arm. "Let go of me!" I shook off his hand, but Shane just looked at me with that irritating smirk of his. "Have you been following me? Still not over me, huh? What?" His absurd accusation left me speechless. "Well, I've remarried a beautiful, young woman. There's no place for an infertile old woman like you. So why don't you just disappear?" He laughed crudely, looking down on me. Even though he had just stopped me to talk, now he was telling me to go away. The nerve! We had only been divorced for a week, and he was already remarried? It hit me then, Shane had been cheating on me. Our marriage had deteriorated not only because we couldn't have children, but also because he had been unfaithful. He must have been so eager to get divorced because he had someone else lined up. What a despicable man. As I frowned, I heard a sugary voice. "Shane, who are you talking to?" The voice belonged to a woman with blonde hair, heavy makeup, and revealing clothes. She was carrying branded bags and accessories, clearly flaunting her wealth. "Oh, you're done shopping? This is my ex-wife." Oh, the infamous ex-wife. She looked at me with disdain. I recognized her from somewhere. Who was she? I almost remembered, but the memory eluded me. Seeing my confusion, Shane smugly introduced her. "Hillary, meet my wife, Mary. Isn't she beautiful and young? Hi there, I'm Shane's Mary. I'm 25. At that moment, I couldn't hold back my laughter. I see, that Mary. I finally remembered who she was. I laughed so hard that tears came to my eyes, leaving Mary and Shane baffled. Between fits of laughter, I managed to say to Shane, "My condolences. Anyway, I'm busy, so I'll be going now." As I tried to leave, Shane hurriedly stopped me. "Hey, wait. What do you mean, my condolences? Is that your way of trying to cope? Coping? Not at all. Then what? Explain yourself," Shane demanded, clearly irritated. "Fine, I'll tell you." I turned to Mary. "I know who you are," I said. "What?" "I don't know any dull, frumpy old woman like you," Mary responded with a puzzled look. Calling me a dull, frumpy old woman, how rude. In a cold voice, I asked her, "Do you know a woman named Aurora?" "Aurora? Oh." She seemed to remember. Her face turned pale. "Aurora. Isn't she Hillary's friend?" "What does Mary have to do with Aurora?" Shane asked anxiously. I answered. She was a hostess who deceived Aurora's boyfriend and bled him dry. The moment he ran out of money, she tossed him aside like trash. "What?" His eyes widened in disbelief. So, I had heard from Aurora that her boyfriend had been deceived and manipulated by a hostess named Mary, who had made him spend lavishly on her. The club had initially explained it was all part of the job. But he genuinely believed they were in love and bought her expensive bags and branded watches at her request. Aurora, not wanting a man who could be fooled by a hostess, decisively broke up with him and has since moved on completely. The picture she showed me then was of this woman, Mary. At first, I thought it was just her boyfriend being naive, but Mary had gone as far as having a physical relationship outside the club, checking out houses to live in after marriage, and using elaborate methods to keep her boyfriend hooked. Moreover, she did this with multiple men, which was shocking. Mary wasn't just toying with her boyfriend, she was doing this to several men. Wasn't it a top executive at a trading company, an officer at a small construction firm, and a manager at the state office? Oh, but she cut ties with them once they stopped spending money. Aren't you being tricked too? That's a lie. There's no way that's true. You're just making things up because you're jealous, aren't you? Don't mess with me. Shane was furious and refused to listen to my warning. That's right. There's no way I'd do something like that. I don't even know who Aurora is, and I haven't made anyone spend money on me. Everything you're saying is a lie. Old woman, you're just jealous because I'm beautiful, aren't you? Mary also blatantly lied and shouted back at me. Mary's right, you're just jealous of her and making up stories. You're a barren old woman and ugly. Barren old woman is hilarious, so pathetic. Get lost, old woman. Taking advantage of my silence, they both hurled insults at me. Feeling it was ridiculous, I said, "All right, fine. Don't believe me then. I really don't care about you anymore. Be happy." And left the scene. Behind me, I could hear his anxious voice. It's really a lie, right? Mary isn't tricking me, right? And Mary's, of course it's a lie. Believe me. I told you everything that old woman said was a lie. That's what I heard. A few days later, I met Aurora and told her about what had happened. What? That Mary remarried Shane. I was already shocked when I heard you divorced Shane, but for him to remarry that woman. She was visibly shocked, her eyes and mouth wide open. Yes, I was really surprised too. It's such a small world. It really is. But Shane, he's in for a rough time. Knowing how Shane had treated me, Aurora smiled slightly, as if she found it amusing. Yes, I think Shane is going to go through hell. Although it seems he's completely infatuated with her right now. We laughed together, feeling somewhat satisfied. One day, after work, I was heading home as usual. Suddenly, from behind, "Hillary." A weak voice called out, startling me so much I almost jumped. When I turned around, it was Shane standing there. "What do you want? Don't scare me like that. What are you doing here? Can you lend me some money?" "What?" Shane was much thinner than when I last saw him. In fact, he was gaunt, with sunken cheeks. His eyes were hollow, and his clothes were worn out, looking very shabby. When I saw Shane and heard him ask for money, I could already guess what had happened. "You look like Mary completely wrecked you, inside and out." "Yeah, that's exactly it. You were right. She used me for every penny I had, and the moment my savings ran dry, she just up and left me." Just as I had warned him, she just married him for his money, used him until he was broke, then left divorce papers and walked out on him. How foolish. I warned you clearly. Oh, I should have listened to you, Hillary. Do you know how much I spent on her? She's such a terrible woman. Don't you feel sorry for me? I was tricked, I'm the victim here. Ha! To call himself a victim, it's just too much. He brought this all upon himself. She took everything from me, and now I can't even pay my rent this month. Of course, I can't pay the utility bills either. Hey, I'm really sorry, but could you lend me some money to live on for now? If not, I'll end up homeless. I was astonished at how easily Shane could ask for such a favor. And also, I want to get back together with you. Please, take me back. Mary tricked me and took everything, and now I realize how wonderful you are. Let's get married again. I'm begging you. Marry me again. I looked at Shane, clinging to me and crying, with cold eyes. Sorry to burst your bubble, but I refuse. What? Why? Why? Have you forgotten what you did to me? I don't love you anymore, not even a tiny bit. I hate you so much I don't even want to see your face. There's no way I'll ever get back together with you. As I stated this clearly, Shane's face turned bright red with anger. Who do you think you are talking to me like that? I'm offering to get back together with a barren woman like you. You should be grateful. I couldn't help but laugh at his words. Why are you laughing? Well, I was just wondering how long you'd keep misunderstanding things. Misunderstanding? I confronted him directly. The infertility issue isn't mine, it's yours. What? Shane was speechless. Remember the test results from the hospital? You didn't stay to hear them. I was going to tell you that night, but you were too busy shouting about divorce to listen to me. Yes, the hospital tests showed that Shane's ability to father a child was nearly zero, making natural conception impossible. On the other hand, I had no issues. Lies. That's a lie. There's no way I could be infertile. Stop making things up. Refusing to believe me, he yelled. I take pride in never having been sick. There's no way I could be infertile. It's definitely you. If you don't believe me, go to the hospital and check for yourself. I calmly told him. Ugh. Is it really true? No, it can't be. There's no way I'll never have children. Shane was visibly shaken, sweating profusely. Up until now, he never even considered he could be the problem. That's why you should go and hear it directly from the doctor. If you ever plan to marry someone else, you should know your own body well. With that, I left the scene. Later, Shane did go to the fertility clinic and heard the results. Here, it was finally made clear to him that he was the one responsible for our infertility, and he finally believed it. He called me many times, but I ignored all of them. Then, he started leaving voicemail messages. Hey, it was my fault. I'm really sorry. Please give me another chance. Answer the phone. I'm begging you. I have no money. The debt is getting out of hand. Hillary, please help me. He left many such messages, and I got so fed up that I deleted them all and blocked Shane. A few days after blocking him, Shane ambushed me outside my workplace. Hillary, please. I don't need us to get back together, but just lend me some money. I'm not asking for much. $10,000, no, even $5,000 would be fine. I'm begging you. We were married, right? Shane pleaded with deep regret. Stop it. Not here. I'm not giving you a single cent. Go away. I'll call the police. Even though I warned him, Shane continued pleading. Lend me the money. He wouldn't budge, so I actually called the police to handle the situation. Shane was apparently so shocked by being confronted by the police, or perhaps afraid of increased police patrols. that he didn't appear in front of me again. Shane continued to pile up debt due to his financial struggles, moving into a rundown apartment and taking a part-time job at a convenience store at night to make ends meet. But the strain took its toll, and he started making frequent mistakes at his main job. He was seen as a burden by everyone, doing poorly at his primary job while also juggling a side job, and he was feeling quite uncomfortable about it. Meanwhile, I had almost completely recovered from the shock of the divorce and was working energetically every day. I had relied heavily on my parents, but now I moved into an apartment near my office and was enjoying a leisurely single life. Recently, on a trip that Aurora and I had been planning for a long time, I started dating a man named Tarek whom I met during the trip. It was a long-distance relationship, but last month, he was transferred to a branch near my house. He asked me, "Would you marry me?" So, it looks like things are going to get busy from now on. You still have that plain face, don't you? By the way, Kate, are you still single and living alone? That's so hilarious. On a holiday, when the doorbell rang, I opened the door to find my sister and standing there, the same sister who had taken my husband Jim from me. 2 years ago, their affair had been discovered, and I had broken up with him. Since then, I had lost track of the two of them, but now Anne had suddenly shown up, mocking my appearance and flaunting the ring on her left ring finger. We got married, so I thought we should meet at least once. Now I'm happily living with your ex-husband. My name is Kate. Since I was a child, I had always been self-conscious about my appearance. My face and body were plain and unremarkable, and while I looked normal to others, I had a beautiful sister named Anne. I had always been compared to her, who was 5 years younger than me. I once overheard relatives. "And is so cute, but Kate is plain. They don't look like sisters. Are they really from the same parents?" saying. Anne knew about these comments and had always looked down on me since childhood. She had a selfish personality and believed she was superior to me, her older sister, and often demanded my things or simply took them if I didn't give them to her. Because of this, I frequently had unpleasant experiences living with her. However, our parents treated us equally regardless of our appearances. They ignored the relatives' hurtful remarks and showered me with love, which made me love my parents dearly. But my parents couldn't protect me from the harsh words at school. Naturally, I was compared to and at school as well. The cute younger sister and the plain older sister. This comparison was frequent, so I decided to excel in academics, as I couldn't compete with my sister in looks. My hard work paid off, and I consistently ranked at the top of my class. My best subject was Spanish, and my parents praised me every time I scored well on a test. However, when I was 17, my mother died in an accident. After mourning her death, I took over the household chores, but Anne didn't seem to grieve much and started treating me like a housekeeper. She always took advantage of our father's absence, which made it even worse. At that time, Anne was just starting middle school. She would order me to buy snacks and drinks and sometimes even demanded money. My monthly allowance is too small. Kate, you don't care about fashion or buying things, right? So, you can lend me some money, can't you? Even when I lent her money reluctantly, she never paid me back. Seeing and becoming more selfish than ever after our mother passed away, I felt a sense of urgency to leave home as soon as possible. I studied hard and managed to get into the university of my choice, starting to live on my own. After 4 peaceful years at university, I landed a job at a major international company. Being good at Spanish, my language skills improved even more after joining the company. Although I faced many challenges, I found my work rewarding and diligently performed my duties for 5 years. Just as I was achieving great success, a male employee who had joined the company that year suddenly confessed his feelings to me. "I've been attracted to you since the first time I saw you. Please go out with me." He stopped me on my way home from work and said this. The man who would later become my boyfriend, Jim, was 5 years younger than me and worked in the same department.
What? Why me? Is this some kind of prank?
When he confessed his feelings, I felt more bewildered than happy. He was quite handsome and very popular at work. There were many women in the company who were much more attractive than I was, so I couldn't help but suspect that Jim was just playing around by choosing to confess to someone as plain as me. But Jim, looking straight at me with a serious expression, continued.
"Kate, you always work so hard and take care of the younger employees. I've always admired your dedication and kindness."
I was surprised because I had hardly ever talked to Jim before. I never imagined that someone as successful as him would even notice me. Honestly, I hadn't paid much attention to him until he confessed to me. Even when other female employees gossiped about how handsome he was, to me, he seemed like someone who was just used to the attention of women and was far out of my league. But Jim's sincere demeanor at that moment deeply moved me.
"If you're okay with someone like me, I'd love to," I said.
I was so embarrassed that I looked down, but when I lifted my head, I clearly remember seeing his delighted smile. I had almost no experience dating men. Throughout high school, I was always compared to and never had a chance for romance, and in college, the one guy I briefly dated broke up with me, calling me dull and plain. So, the idea of dating someone as good-looking as Jim was incredibly exciting to me at the time. We soon started living together. Our relationship went smoothly, and Jim would visit my father several times a year to show his face. My father was very happy that I had a boyfriend. Jim also seriously told my father, "I want to marry Kate someday," which made me incredibly happy. 3 years later, we got married. I was 30, and Jim was 25. When our coworkers heard about the wedding, they all warmly congratulated us, and I was on cloud 9. Jim transferred to a different department at work after our marriage, but we both continued to work hard. After registering our marriage, we decided to visit my father together. My father was happy about our marriage, but I hadn't informed my sister about it. Maybe my father had told her, but I hadn't received any contact from her. Although I knew her contact information, we hadn't kept in touch since I left home, and I avoided seeing her whenever I visited. And was still living at home. She had repeated a year in high school and 2 more in college, finally graduating this year. I planned my visit to avoid meeting Anne, who I didn't want to see. However, while my father, Jim, and I were chatting pleasantly, the front door opened and a familiar voice called out, "I'm home." I froze in surprise, as I feared, and walked into the living room.
"And you're home early today,"
my father said. "My plans got canceled, so I came back. By the way, who's this handsome guy?" And explained about her canceled plans and then, without looking at me, stared intently at Jim. I felt uncomfortable with how she seemed to be sizing him up and was about to tell her to stop when Jim's face lit up at the sight of Anne.
"Nice to meet you. I'm Jim, Kate's husband,"
he said, standing up and smiling as he approached Anne. Jim was obviously charmed, and Anne introduced herself with a look that suggested she didn't mind the attention. I had a bad feeling about this. Anne turned to me with a sly smile.
"I heard from Dad that Kate got married, but I can't believe she married someone so handsome. Isn't he too good for plain Kate?" "Anne, how could you say such a thing?"
Dad immediately scolded her, but it had no effect on Anne. On the contrary, Anne clung to Jim, linking her arm with his and pressing her body close. "Hey, Jim. How old are you?" "What do you do on your days off?" and looked up at Jim with a sweet voice, trying to entice him. Rather than being bothered, Jim started conversing with her, still close, leaving me unsure of what to do.
"Anne, knock it off!"
I couldn't bring myself to yell, and I was about to cry with vague anxiety when Dad sternly reprimanded Anne. She glared at me with discontent but reluctantly pulled away from Jim and left the living room. After that, conversations with Dad didn't go smoothly, and we decided to leave. However, just as we were about to step out the door, Anne, who was supposed to be in her room, came back and snuggled up to Jim again.
"Jim, come again soon."
She quickly stepped back, but I couldn't shake off the bad feeling. Because Jim looked so happy while talking to Anne. It was clear he was captivated by her beauty. Since visiting my parents' house, his behavior had significantly changed. He started carrying his smartphone everywhere, even to the bathroom or when he went to the toilet.
"Hey, what's going on lately? Are you expecting a message from someone?"
When I asked curiously.
"None of your business, Kate."
Jim only responded irritably. Recently, Jim's attitude towards me had become cold, almost like he was a different person. Our conversations as a couple dwindled, and Jim began going out alone from the morning on weekends. He would always return home late at night or early the next morning. Whenever I asked where he had been, he always evaded the question. I didn't want to doubt Jim, but with such frequent occurrences, my distrust only grew. One day, I had a business trip that would keep me away for a few days. The trip was supposed to last 3 days. However, the work finished half a day early, allowing me to return home on the night of the second day. I sent a message to Jim before coming back, but there was no reply even after I arrived home. I thought it was probably because it was sudden, and he hadn't checked his smartphone, so I didn't worry about it as I opened the front door. I had a feeling someone was there. At that moment, I felt the same bad premonition as when Jim first met Anne. He wasn't in the living room. But I heard voices coming from the bedroom, so I decided to head there. I slowly opened the closed door, and I was shocked by the scene. Jim and Anne were there, naked and embracing each other.
"What are you two doing?"
I was momentarily stunned, but quickly came to my senses and shouted, "What the hell, Kate? I thought you were coming back tomorrow." Jim, apparently not having checked his smartphone, grumbled while getting dressed, showing no sign of remorse. He might have been ignoring my messages on purpose. "What the hell, you ruined a good moment."
"Kate, you never know how to read the room, do you?"
And glared at me with annoyance after getting dressed.
"And what is going on? This is cheating."
I angrily confronted her, but Anne mocked me.
"What?" "Jim and I agreed to this, so there's no problem. Jim said he prefers me to a plain woman like you."
Anne said triumphantly, clinging to Jim. Jim patted Anne's head with satisfaction, not even glancing my way, even though I was his wife. Watching the two of them, my intense anger quickly subsided, and my affection for Jim began to fade. While they were engrossed in each other, I slipped my hand into my pocket, took out my smartphone, and started operating it.
"Hey, Jim. Recently, you've been distant and always carrying your smartphone around. Is it because you've been in contact with Anne?"
I asked, trying to remain calm. Jim finally looked at me and sneered.
"Yeah, that's right. And is beautiful and attractive, unlike you, Kate. It's a pity that Anne has an unattractive sister like you."
Jim mocked my appearance and praised Anne. Apparently, Jim had taken a liking to Anne when he visited my family some time ago. And felt the same way. When we were leaving, she secretly slipped a note with her contact information into his pocket. Jim sent a message to the number on that note, and that's how their relationship started, Jim explained unapologetically. Furthermore,
I only married you because I knew about your achievements and thought you'd make a good wallet. Who would want to be with someone as unattractive as you otherwise?
hearing his insults, my vision nearly went black. Jim's serious demeanor when he confessed his feelings to me had been a lie to deceive me. Fighting back tears of frustration, I quickly called my father to report what and Jim had done. My father rushed over to my house, and seeing Jim and together, he was furious.
You too! What a stupid thing you've done!
However, and showed no remorse despite my father's anger. Jim also.
I'm sorry about this, but I've fallen in love with Anne,
he said brazenly. Even my father was taken aback by his audacity, sighing deeply.
That's enough, Anne. I'm cutting ties with you. I've overlooked your selfishness up to now, but this time I'm done. You haven't been looking for a job at all, so I won't be helping you anymore. Don't come back home.
Even when my father disowned her, her expression didn't change. Fine by me.
I'm going to be happy with Jim from now on.
Not a single word of apology to my father for raising her all these years. My disgust grew. I reached my breaking point and glared at the two of them.
Then do whatever you want. Jim, we're getting a divorce.
Yeah, fine.
That would be a relief. Don't ever show your face to me again.
His insults no longer reached my ears. I felt ridiculous for having been married to someone like him, even for a short while. I told Jim I was divorcing him, left them behind, and moved out of my apartment that very day. After moving back to my family home, I quit my job, but thanks to my father, I quickly found a new one. My father worked for a foreign company in the same industry as my previous job. There was a job opening, and my father, who held a high position, spoke to the CEO on my behalf to get me hired. By the time the divorce was finalized, Jim had also left the company, and he and had moved somewhere unknown. I enjoyed a peaceful life with my father and adapted well to my new job. 2 years passed like that. By this time, I had almost forgotten about Jim and Anne, but then something unexpected happened. It was my day off, and I was doing housework when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Jim and Anne, who had been missing. Seeing my face, they both sneered.
How have you been?
Jim said to me, as I stood there in shock at their sudden visit. You still have that plain face, huh? Seriously, Kate, still living at home and single? It's hilarious. And laughed.
What are you even doing here?
I asked, feeling exasperated, and took the opportunity to show off her left hand. A ring sparkled on her ring finger, and Jim was wearing a matching one.
We got married. Thought we'd drop by to see my dad at least once. Jim and I are living happily together now.
I gave them a cold look, wondering how she could say that to her ex-wife. I wanted to slam the door shut and kick them out immediately, but they pushed past me and forced their way inside.
Move. Is Tom here?
Jim bumped into my shoulder on purpose as he rudely entered the house. Anne, who had been disowned by my father, acted like she didn't remember any of it. Hearing the commotion, my father came out from the back of the house. He was momentarily surprised to see and Jim, but quickly put on a smile.
Oh, Anne. And Jim, too. You came at just the right time. I have something to discuss with you both. Come this way.
And Jim seemed pleased by my father's reaction. They followed his lead and headed to the living room with light steps, and I trailed behind them. My father handed them some papers as they sat down on the couch, without a hint of suspicion. Their faces froze as they read the contents. It was a bill for compensation for their affair with me.
What is this? Dad, what does this mean?
Jim and Ann protested, turning pale. My father, his earlier cheerful expression replaced with a stern glare, said,
There's nothing to explain. I never forgave you for what you did to Kate. I couldn't track you down before, but now that you're here, I'm holding you accountable.
He pressed on as Ann and Jim grew more anxious.
At the time, Kate captured photos and recordings of your affair. The evidence is solid. You can't talk your way out of this.
Ann and Jim fell silent under my father's harsh scrutiny. 2 years ago, I had secretly recorded audio and taken photos when I caught them in the act. I still had the data on my smartphone, ready to present it as proof of their infidelity.
There's no way we can come up with that kind of money,
Jim said in a despairing voice. But my father's expression,
I have another matter to discuss with you,
softened. He then retrieved a few more papers from a drawer and handed them to Ann and Jim. I already knew what they were, the deed transfer documents for this house. My father proposed giving them the house as a lifetime gift. As expected, their eyes lit up instantly, and they eagerly agreed.
So, you're giving us this house? Why didn't you say so earlier? Then we can sell the house to pay off the compensation.
All they seemed to care about was selling the house for money. Their financial situation was tight, and they quickly signed the papers, thrilled with the unexpected windfall.
So, Kate gets nothing even though she lives here with Dad?
That's sad. And sneered at me after signing the papers. She seemed to think my father wasn't giving me anything. When I didn't respond, they began preparing to leave, their business concluded.
All right, Dad, we'll be back. You two make sure to pay Kate her compensation soon,
my father said firmly, and Jim replied, Of course, Tom.
Thanks for giving us the house,
he answered dismissively. Watching them leave, still mocking me and clearly pleased with themselves, I saw my father look at me and nod with a smile. I nodded in return and started packing for a certain preparation. Actually, my father and I had originally planned to move out of this house soon. It was just at that time that Ann and Jim appeared, so my father brought up the topic of giving them an advance inheritance. After we moved out, Ann and Jim tried to sell the family home immediately, but the house, although spacious, was quite old and deteriorated. We received a call about that once.
You really stuck us with that old house. It's not worth any money at all.
As soon as the call connected, she was furious, but I had no intention of taking her seriously.
You two were the ones who happily signed the contract, weren't you? I don't care about the money. As long as I get the compensation, that's all I need. No way!
I ignored the disheartened Ann and hung up the phone. In the end, selling the house didn't come close to covering the compensation, so Ann and Jim had to take on debt and work non-stop every day. Jim had already changed jobs, but his salary was lower than at his previous company, making life tough. Additionally, Ann, who had always lived off her parents' and Jim's money, had never worked before. As a result, she was extremely exhausted from the unfamiliar working life at the company she somehow managed to get hired at. One day, my sister and her husband, burdened with huge debts, called me again. However, at that time, I was on a plane with my father, so my smartphone was turned off, and I didn't notice the call. We were on an international flight, out of signal range for more than half a day. After getting off the plane, I checked my smartphone and found dozens of messages from Ann and Jim. The messages were demanding a redo of the advance inheritance.
How selfish can they be? We've already given them the compensation. I don't intend to deal with those two anymore.
My father, muttering this, had also received a ton of messages on his smartphone and started deleting all of them in exasperation. I don't want to have anything to do with them either. But since we're overseas now, we won't meet them again in the future. After that, we blocked their numbers and rejected their calls, cutting off all contact from and in Jim. Actually, my father and I have decided to live abroad from now on. And currently, I'm remarried, and my husband was also on the plane with us. I met my husband at the company I joined thanks to my father. He was an employee sent from overseas, and he said he was attracted to my intelligence and thoughtfulness, so he asked me out, and we soon got married. The company has now launched a project to expand its business overseas, and since I can speak Spanish, I moved abroad with my husband and father. The new house we bought, thanks to my husband, who is a local, is a very luxurious detached property. Since moving into the new house, I've been able to forget all the unpleasant things from before. Now I can live freely and am working hard every day in this new place. I'm enjoying my new life, feeling fulfilled by the overseas project with my husband and father.
Your son's wife being a recluse is shameful. Get out.
Ignoring her own freeloading presence in our home, my mother-in-law Emily calls me unemployed. She just eats and sleeps all day. She's the real unemployed one. Who should leave? Just wait and see. I'll break her spirit. My name is Shirley. Recently, I suddenly got hooked on cookies, and while watching TV and munching away, my waist started looking like I was wearing a floa tie. I'm 39 years old. I've been taking in too many calories without moving much. This happened about 2 years ago. Finally, my workplace introduced remote work. Normally, I'd be like, "Yay! I can sleep in since I don't have to commute." I would be so happy, but,
"Hey, how long are you going to stay home? Shouldn't you be getting ready to go to work by now?"
It was my mother-in-law Emily, who lives with us, scolding me as I enjoyed my extra time from not having to commute with a nice coffee. Oops, I misspoke. Strictly speaking, she doesn't live with us, she's a freeloading intruder. About a year after my husband Ryan and I stopped visiting the in-laws' house due to a widespread infection, Emily suddenly showed up at our home with a large suitcase.
"Is Ryan doing well? I want to play with my grandchild, so I'm moving in starting today." "What?"
Of course, both my husband Ryan and I were against it. We have a 5-year-old daughter, Carol, and we stopped visiting to protect her from the infection. We didn't like Emily coming from their house in a more populated area to our home, and George, my father-in-law, was left behind at their house. I felt sorry for him, and living with Emily seemed like a hassle. There was no benefit, so I wanted her to leave. I tried to gently tell Emily that we didn't want her to stay, but either I was too gentle, or Emily had no intention of listening to us from the start. She didn't get it at all. No matter how many times we told her to go home. She'd accuse us of being cold-hearted or say young people these days don't respect their parents. Eventually, she managed to stay by giving us lectures. Is it because we're too weak that she barged in? No, there are people out there who simply don't listen and are very pushy. On the first day Emily barged in, we had a huge fight, and instead of leaving, she tried to barricade herself on the second floor of our house. When I stood in her way, she made such a scene that Carol was frightened and cried loudly. It was a mess. My husband and I, exhausted from work and child-rearing, didn't have the energy to fight off such a monster. That's how we ended up living with this demanding mother-in-law. Watching me drink coffee, Emily glared and said,
"Didn't I tell you yesterday that I'm working remotely now?"
I thought to myself as I tried to explain my new work arrangement to her again.
"We switched to remote work because an infection was spreading in the office, making it impossible to work. So, I don't have to go to the office." "Don't lie. You can't work from home,"
she said arrogantly. "Remote work is becoming more common, you know?
My company was actually late in adopting it. Haven't you seen the news about how remote work is reducing train usage and other related information? I know that. But you work for a construction company, right? How can you work in civil engineering from home? I'm in administration, so as long as I have a computer, I can communicate with the office. Oh, sure, whatever. Don't underestimate your elders. You probably think we are not tech-savvy, but the baby boomer generation and even older are quite tech-savvy. I know there aren't such convenient jobs. Here we go again. No matter how much I tell the truth, Emily, who believes she's always right, won't listen. She's a master at justifying herself and ultimately wears us down with her lectures. Not wanting to be worn out before work, I listened to Emily's lecture with a face that said, "You're absolutely right." But the problem didn't go away. As expected, Emily gradually started calling me unemployed as I continued my remote work day after day. Ryan works outside, but you just play on the computer at home. If you have time to play on the computer, you should be doing housework. She hurled terrible words at me. By the way, I did all the housework too. I prepared her breakfast, cleaned the house, did the shopping, everything. Oh, and Ryan helped out too. Rather, Emily, who just ate the meals I prepared and lounged around all day, was the real unemployed person living off others. Ignoring her own situation, she said whatever she wanted. Day after day, I complained to Ryan about being called unemployed, and Ryan, in turn, kept asking Emily to return to George, practically begging. One day, while I was holed up in my room having an online meeting with my bosses, Emily suddenly burst in. "Hey! There's no more cookies!" I was stunned by her red-faced yelling and was taken aback. But she didn't care and loudly ordered me to go buy some more. I quickly turned off my meeting microphone and told Emily, "I'm in a meeting. I'm in a meeting. You're just pretending to work while playing around." "What meeting? You're just a shut-in. There's no snacks. Stop complaining and go buy some. And I wanted rice for breakfast today, but you served bread for 2 days in a row. How can you be so thoughtless? You're really stupid." She should do these things herself. She's freeloading and not even contributing to living expenses. To be honest, the house is under my name, and I pay a $1,800 mortgage every month. Right after we decided to buy a house, Ryan was forced to transfer to a faraway branch, and when he refused, they demoted him, so he decided to quit. At that time, I was working for a larger construction company than I am now and had financial stability, so I took out the mortgage under my name. Now Ryan covers the living expenses, and we split everything else equally as a couple. How could I possibly be what she calls unemployed? That day, she kept pestering me to go buy cookies, and when she got too insistent, I shut her out of the room. Emily got so mad she pounded on the door repeatedly. I went back to the meeting, but I couldn't concentrate, and the day's work was a disaster. When I told Ryan about it, he, who usually chose his words carefully around Carol, uncharacteristically shouted at Emily, "Enough is enough!" He had reached his limit with this living arrangement too. Emily, while not doting, had always had a soft spot for her only son, Ryan. Usually, she takes a "I'm the parent" stance and is strong-willed, but when Ryan gets genuinely angry, she becomes weak. If Ryan could control his anger and be serious, maybe Emily would have left our house. But Ryan is gentle by nature, so it's not usually his way. When he forcibly grabbed her arm and dragged her to the front door, Emily finally calmed down a bit. "Oh, did you think we actually kicked her out?" Ryan managed to push her outside, but Emily threw a fit and forced her way back inside. Both Ryan and I resisted letting her back in,
and ended up with several bruises on our arms and legs. It seemed she had no intention of moving. She hates being told what to do, so even if we tried to kick her out, she'd just come back. If only we could break her spirit. But we had no idea how to handle such a monster. After a period of relative calm, Emily suddenly said one day,
"I met a neighbor on my walk today. They said their wife also works remotely but still goes to the office sometimes."
"So, your story is a lie."
"What?"
She walked in while I was working, looking smug as if to say, "See, I was right." I couldn't help but pause my work.
"I knew something was off with you being home every day." What are you talking about? I'm in the middle of work right now."
"Stop with the lies."
"I heard from the neighbors that not every remote worker is home every day. They go to the office sometimes."
"Well, that depends on the company's policy.
Mine allows full remote work, so I choose to stay home because of Carol." "Trying to cover up your lie now is just childish."
"No, really, it depends on the company." "I'm so embarrassed for you."
"When I told the neighbors that my son's wife never leaves the house, they were shocked at your remote work setup."
"How embarrassing." They were probably just surprised by the variety of work styles. But to Emily, it sounded like,
"There's no way such remote work exists. Your son's wife must be a recluse."
She wore a triumphant grin, laughing loudly. Emily's gloating continued, so I gently said,
"Excuse me, I need to focus on my work."
I asked her politely to leave, but it was futile.
"If you're just playing around, you should listen to people. I'm saying this for your own good."
She got even angrier. Trying to be courteous to avoid escalation was pointless. What should I have done? But I really needed to prioritize my work. I was urgently building a program for work, and I was close to finishing. I had no time for Emily's antics.
"The reason for this cohabitation is your fault for not visiting us. Are you reflecting on that?"
Emily's irrational scolding intensified. She finally grabbed my laptop, turned it off, and said,
"Listen when people talk to you."
Despite frequent saves, I lost about an hour's worth of work.
"Damn it. An unemployed wife is a disgrace. You're just a moocher. Get out."
Emily threw my laptop at me. Luckily, it didn't hit me, but the screen was cracked. It was my personal laptop, not a company one, but still. Why do I have to be called unemployed by Emily, who barged in uninvited, disrupted my work, and made me buy a new laptop? Why does she get to live here without doing any chores or paying rent, while I handle everything? The anger simmered within me. Is this what it means to have an outburst of anger? Something snapped inside me. From that day on, I stopped arguing with her. Without a laptop, I had to go to the office, and this reduced contact with Emily, making it somewhat bearable. "Finally decided to work, huh?" And other sarcastic comments came my way. But I just nodded and said, "Yes, yes," letting them roll off my back. When I told him what happened, he was furious and determined to kick Emily out. But by this point, a simple eviction wouldn't satisfy my anger. Fortunately, Emily had an upcoming trip with old friends. During her absence, I planned revenge. A week later, Emily's voice rang from the front door.
"I'm back."
She returned from her trip in high spirits and went upstairs.
"Oh, what? What's going on?"
Emily rattled the doorknob frantically. "Welcome back, Emily."
"Why are you in my room?"
"Since I'm unemployed, I thought I'd hole up in your room."
"What?"
"Yes, I took over Emily's room after she left for her trip."
"Stop joking and open the door. You're ruining my good mood from the trip. Get out of my room." Why should I? This is my house. What? I own this house. Emily, you never had a room here. Don't give me that. I've been using it for years, so it's my room. We never agreed to live with you. We've tried to kick you out multiple times. Your current situation is more like trespassing. Oh, come on. Just come out of there. No! Emily, enraged by my refusal, began kicking the door, but I didn't budge. Granny, you shouldn't break things. I heard Carol's innocent voice from the other side of the door. It seemed Ryan was there too, as I heard him say, "Don't become like Granny, okay?" Why am I being treated like a joke? Emily's anger intensified. This is it, Mom. You can leave now, leave thoughtfully, or leave and never come back. Choose one of the three. There's no choice but to leave. She screamed in rage, but Carol added, get out. Whether she understood the situation or not. The words from her granddaughter seemed to affect Emily, who weakly said, What is this? I've done so much for you. We've been more than patient and accommodating because you're our parent, but you've trampled on all of that. Ryan replied, How dare you? You never visit us. With the infection spreading, we couldn't. You only think about yourself, Mom. His logical retort left Emily shouting, I'm not wrong. All right, this isn't going anywhere. Okay, Emily, I'll open the door for you. What? Sensing something off in my tone. She was visibly suspicious and hesitant. Without waiting for her response, I opened the door. That moment, Emily froze as she took in the sight of the room. No! Where is he? Where is Jean? I threw it out with the trash the day before yesterday. How could you do that? I'll get you for this. Emily, half crazed, lunged at me, but I deftly sidestepped her. Jean was Emily's favorite handsome Korean idol. This trip had been organized with her friends who were also Jean fans, staying at a hotel where Jean had discreetly stayed. Every time he visited the US, she attended his events, buying special edition CDs and limited merchandise. When she first arrived at our house from the in-laws' place, 80% of her suitcase was filled with Jean merchandise. The moment she moved in, her room's walls were plastered with his posters, and framed photos lined the shelves. But now, why is everything Johnny Cash? Emily's half-crying voice echoed as she realized that all her beloved Jean posters and merchandise had been replaced with Johnny Cash memorabilia. I sold them at auction. I replied, That's not the point. Emily screamed, Oh my God! Even the curtains are different. I thought those girly pink lace curtains didn't suit your lack of charm, so I switched them to an American traditional pattern. What about my bear rug? Why is it Mount St. Helens now? And my Mickey Mouse plushies, what is this? Swamp Thing? Just trying to coordinate more age appropriately. What? Wait. Did you really throw out all of my Jean stuff? Emily's face turned pale as she shook my shoulders. As you can see, I said with a smile. Emily looked around, staring at the walls, her mouth agape, and then collapsed to her knees. She was evidently in deep shock. More than I had anticipated. Look at this, Emily. Those Johnny Cash posters cost me about $30 each, including shipping. Cheap? Maybe. But how many do you see? I even laid them out on the floor where you can't see them. And this Mount St. Helens rug, it's hand-woven. How much do you think that cost? Plus, I paid an absurd amount on a flea market app for that Swamp Thing plushie. The price was ridiculous. Emily asked, What are you trying to say? Well, if I were really unemployed, I wouldn't have the money to buy all this. It shows that I earn enough to pull off this prank. So what? I don't care anymore.
Crushed by the loss of Jean, Emily couldn't even argue.
If you go silent on me, it's not as fun. How about this, then? What?
Emily froze again as I quietly opened the closet.
My clothes? From now on, you only get this stylish tracksuit and a single t-shirt.
I showed her a tracksuit with an American traditional pattern and a white t-shirt that simply said unemployed.
What is this? I have a Jean event next week. I can't dress up for it.
Why not wear the tracksuit? It's stylish, probably. Maybe. Hopefully.
If you don't like it, leave now. Get out! Get out!
Ryan and Carol echoed my sentiment. Emily, overwhelmed by the series of shocks, began to cry.
I've had enough of this house.
With that, Emily grabbed the suitcase she had taken on her trip and left our home. The eviction plan was a complete success. I had thought Jean was the key to breaking her spirit, and it worked even better than I'd expected. Later, I contacted the in-laws' house and said,
if you want the Jean merchandise back, you'll have to pay for the living expenses and the laptop.
Did I actually throw out the Jean stuff? Of course not. Even with family, that would be criminal. I had only pretended to discard it to break her spirit. In reality, all of Emily's belongings were hidden in Ryan's room. Relieved, Emily immediately agreed to my terms.
For Jean's sake,
she said, and transferred the money for the living expenses and the new laptop into my bank account. However, it turned out that the money came from George's retirement savings. Money that had been saved for emergencies during their old age. With the revelation that Emily had used George's retirement savings for the trip and her fan activities, George was furious. The couple had already been on bad terms because Emily refused to return to their home, but this was the last straw. Naturally, this led to a huge fight, and they eventually divorced. Moreover, since the in-laws' house originally belonged to George's family, Emily was kicked out. Emily probably wanted to rely on us, but Ryan preemptively declared that we wouldn't take care of her. Having had such a dramatic confrontation with me, Emily accepted that she wouldn't be forgiven and didn't seek our help. In the end, she moved in with her estranged sister, but rumors say her nieces aren't thrilled about it. Meanwhile, our home is livelier than ever with Carol now in elementary school. Recently, Carol learned how to make sandwiches at a school event and insists on making them for us every day, so our dinners have been all sandwiches. Well, someday, Carol will make the best sandwiches for someone special. For now, we'll just be her practice testers. Ryan had a hard time getting recognized after switching jobs. But finally, last year, the company revised its evaluation system and he got promoted. Working at an old-fashioned company meant the evaluation system wasn't always fair. I hope times continue to improve and life gets easier. Thanks to his promotion, our lives have become a bit more comfortable. With rising costs, we can't say we're living extravagantly, but with Ryan, Carol, and all of us sharing meals together, it's a happy life. Happiness depends on what you make of it. Thankfully, my job remains enjoyable, and except for my weight, there are no health concerns. When Carol said,
I want to take care of a rescue cat,
we went to a cat adoption event, and our family grew. Now, it's the 3 of us and 3 cats. How could this not be a happy life? I think we're living happier days than anyone else.